Welcome to Yes Witch, your pod spellcast for all things metaphysical, witchy, and weird. My name is Whitney Wickham, and I will be your host. We're going to go ahead and dive right into this week's podcast. Today we'll be discussing what makes you a witch. My mom would say it's probably my really negative attitude. But, you know. First, we're going to go ahead and talk about tarot cards. Lovely little tool that I personally love to use. I am obsessed with tarot cards. Tarot and oracle cards. So, tarot cards come in many different forms, but the most popular is the Rider-Waite tarot. I have here my version. This is the Hermetic Tarot. It's in black and white. I like this particular deck. I use this often, mostly because it has different symbols, and I'm a very symbol-driven witch. I really dive into metaphor and symbology more than most people, I think, and so I really personally like this deck over my other Rider-Waite tarot deck. And there's many different spreads and things that you can use for your own personal divination. But the reason why I want to talk about tarot is because working with tarot is such a personalized experience, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't really understand how it works. So the way I like to describe the difference between tarot and oracle is that tarot cards really are, they're really more of like a whole book. They look at whatever the question is or the situation that you're trying to find answers to. They look at that situation as an entire chapter book. And oracle cards get a little bit more specific, and they look at the situation more as a chapter in that book. And so that's really a key and important thought process when you go to somebody to get your cards read. They might throw both cards out there. Personally, when I read cards, unless it's been specified that they only want one particular type of card, I will throw every type of card out there. I mean, like, if my guides are like, hey, you know what, this person needs a little bit more information about that, let's get a little bit more specific, I will find whatever oracle deck I have that pertains more to like path choosing or love or whatever their situation is, and I will use that particular deck to emphasize the reading through the tarot cards that I am also using. So they're a really great tool, and I love to use them. I try not to use them on myself every single day. I know that there's a lot of people that do a card pull for themselves every day. I learned for myself that I've become a little bit too addicted to that, and that I will rule my entire life choices based off of what tarot cards I pull. Like, I'm not about to carry around my tarot cards in a grocery store and be like, what can of soup should I buy? Please, cards, lead me. Which way should I spend my money? That is getting a little bit too crazy, because we do have free will and we have choice, and that's part of what makes living life beautiful. So let's use our common sense and not use tarot for every little thing. But tarot is a valuable resource in helping illuminate choices and what the probable outcome of those choices should be. Now, how people read tarot cards is very different across the board. I recently did a reading on a woman and her son in person, and it was interesting because she said to me, wow, I've never had anybody read my cards without having me touch the cards first. I personally am very retentive about people touching my cards. I want to be the only one touching my cards, and that's because I have a very strong energy myself. And when somebody touches my cards, it tends to disrupt that energy. And so I'm very protective about people not touching my cards. If somebody touches it on accident or something, I don't freak out about it, but I will cleanse my cards more often if somebody touches a card or is interested in handling them for whatever reason. I will cleanse my cards and start anew. But that being said, there are some readers that like you to touch the cards to sort of get your energy in the mix, etc. And there are even decks out there that instruct that. What I would say about that is that those of us that have done readings online, or at a distance, there's no way to really do that. So the way that I personally read tarot cards is I tap into that person's energy. And being a Reiki healer, that's a lot easier for me to do because I've trained in that art of tapping into a person's specific energy field and then using that energy that I'm pulling from them to help mediate the card pull. Not everybody can do that. Some people ask for your birth date and your horoscope sign. Whatever works. There's many different ways to do it. There's no, really, in all honesty, as a tarot reader, I can tell you that you find your own flow. You find your own way of using the cards to your advantage. What spreads work for you, what ones don't. Sometimes you just intuitively start pulling cards and you're like, I don't know what this means by looking at it, here for face value, but this makes sense. And then you start to basically gain the personality of your cards and use that to your advantage. Tarot cards, the common misconception that I've realized with people that don't know about divination is that they go into a read thinking that they're going to get definitive answers about their question. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the question, will my ex come back to me? That is such a hard question to ask because I think we need to remember that choice is such a huge part of any situation. You've got other people involved in the situation and their choices impact that as well. So asking a question like that, there is no card that's like, yes, ma'am, he's definitely going to come back and it's going to be on this date. I mean, I literally have gotten that question so many times it has driven me away from doing online reads because the questions are always, is my ex going to come back? When are they going to come back? And they want a specific date. And it's like, tarot does not work that way. And I hate to be that person that tears down everybody's dream that the majority of people that are doing tarot cards are not getting messages from beyond that are going to give you 100% exactly when something's going to happen, why it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And it's really frustrating for those of us that do read because we're actually looking at symbols. We're looking at what do these cards mean together? How does this entire landscape of different cards that I've put down, how do they work together? And what are the symbols here that I'm reading into? What do these mean? And how does that then get interpreted to the person's situation that they're asking questions about? So having people come and ask those questions can be very frustrating. So if you are planning on getting a tarot read and you've never had one before, you are very much encouraged to do so. Just know your expectations. It's always best to ask questions that are action questions. Like, what would my best steps be to having a relationship with my ex once more? Would be a better question than asking, will my ex come back to me? And the reason being is because the cards, like I said, they're split into houses or they're split into different types of cards. Like these are the ones that handle emotion. These are the ones that handle finances. These are the ones that handle tragedy. Whatever it is, there's different meanings to different types of cards. And so being able to ask a question in that manner rather than a yes/no question really allows the cards to be read in a much more effective manner. Going off of that in a more detailed aspect of that, tarot cards can't be overly specific either. There's no card in there that says specifically what job you'll have either. Like there's no, or what house you'll have. Yes, no questions or super, super specific questions generally get muffled responses, very odd responses. So unless your person that is doing the read is very, very psychic and intuitive and can tap into your energies and your guides and speak to them personally and really get an idea of what the situation is, which exists. I mean, I've had really great readers that do that for myself. If that's the case, awesome. Then you're going to get a better result. But generally speaking, when you're getting tarot done, it's just not feasible to have a very specific answer about a very, very specific yes/no question. Like I said, there's no card out there that says you'll be a secretary, but there are cards that pertain to different types of job sectors. So there's, like I said, there's cards that pertain to finances. There's cards that pertain to, creativity. So depending on the type of card, you might get sort of like a little pocket where you assume that, well, because I'm interested in these things, my job might be something like this, or the person that I will find in my life that will become my, spouse or my longtime lover is going to be more like this type of card. I.e. the person that represents that particular card. So it's important to know that and understand when you are going into these reads, or when you're doing reads even for yourself, know what to expect from your tarot cards. Know also that as you are working with your cards, you're building a relationship with them. You're building sort of a trust and an understanding. There are limitations to every single deck you have, which is why I've got like 50 different decks, because at the end of the day, some decks are better suited for certain things. I have a deck that if somebody comes to me and asks, hey, I'm having a really hard time trying to decide what to do with my life, I have a specific deck for that for that question. And time and time again, it has given really great results where people have come back to me and said, you know what, I'm so glad that I asked that question to you, because the choices that you presented to me and the thought processes that came from our discussion with that card reading has really helped illuminate a better path for me. So just know that there's different limitations and expectations from different cards. When you go in for a reading or you do a reading on yourself, be aware of what you are asking your cards. This is such a difficult thing to say. I hate having kind of a negative attitude about stuff. I mean, really, honestly, like I'm always trying to be a very positive person. But what I will say is that if you are going into a reading, or you yourself are doing a reading on yourself or a friend, if the question that you're asking, you already sort of feel like you want a specific answer. Like let's just do a love read as an example, because that's generally the most common type question that I've gotten in the past is love readings. If it's about an ex-lover and they want to know when that person's coming back, it can be very common that the person only wants to hear the answer yes. I've worked for a few different online psychic services, and 99% of the reads that I have done have been about love. And if they come into my chat and I say, unfortunately, I'm not seeing that in the cards, bam, they are gone like that. They don't want to hear it. They want nothing to do with that answer. They want somebody that is going to tell them, yes, absolutely, I see in your future that you and him will be together, or you and her will be together, or whatever. That's what they're focused on. And so a lot of times when it comes to divination, psychic services of any kind, just note that the people that you're dealing with are going to want to hear what they want to hear. And so when you answer their question in a way that doesn't seem suitable to their desires, they're going to get upset about it. And so really ask yourself, if you're getting a reading or you're doing a reading, are you going to be willing to hear the answer and see the options for the choices that are laid out in front of you? Because if you're not willing to see that, then it's probably not a good idea to do a reading on it. And I say that with the utmost respect and dignity to each and every person. But I think that it's important to ask that of yourself, is that, am I willing to hear the answer? Because if you're not willing to hear something different than what you've already got in your mind, then there's no point in asking the question, because you yourself are already then blocking choices and making choices for yourself that are not going to allow those paths to open. And it can create serious blockages in your life by doing that. So it's important to know what do I want my answer to be? Because if I want my answer to be that, then I'm going to be unhappy with the reading. The other thing is that if you're doing a read for yourself, and I've seen this for myself 1,000 times, is that oftentimes we end up making the read come out kind of based off of whatever emotions are running through our system at that time. Like if I'm having a really bad day and I'm doing a read, I'm going to pull really, really negative cards. Like I will get 10 of swords and 9 of swords like real quick. And if you don't know tarot cards, those cards have to do with like basically the proverbial being stabbed in the back sort of thing, and high emotions running, feeling like people are talking about you behind your back and feeling like really abandoned. Those are what those cards mean. And so if I have a really negative attitude and I do a card reading, I know I'm gonna get those cards. Like, it's gonna happen every single time without fail. So just know that whatever energy you're putting out there is kind of the energy that's gonna come back towards you in your read. And so just don't be surprised when and if that begins to happen. So like I said, tarot cards can be a great way to help you. My suggestion is that if you want to get more into tarot, there's a great website that I'll go ahead and put in my notes as well, and link it in my show notes. It's called Biddy Tarot, BiddyTarot.com. It's run by this amazing woman in Australia, I believe, and she actually runs a school through her site teaching you how to read tarot. And I love the descriptions that she puts on her webpage for every card. Again, she runs the Rider-Waite version of the cards, but there's many different interpretations, and so her website, you can look up every card and the interpretation. And then there's also psychics that she's have written articles about the cards and the way that they see the cards, because in all reality, yeah, there's all sorts of different meanings that can be pertaining to one particular card, but you might find that for yourself, those cards mean something completely different. Like, if this card comes into play in this position, it means this for me, even though the book says that it means this. And so those types of things can be important. Also, whatever symbols are on there, for me, the moon is like a really great card. And for some people, it's not. It's kind of like a card for some people. And for me, it's a really great card to get. Because I know that that's from my guides, because my guides tend to run more in the lunar type cycles of things. That for me, that is a symbol that my guides are really reaching out to me and really talking to me. Same with the star. So we'll find, there are certain cards that are affirmation cards to you, and you'll find cards that are, warnings to you, that when they pop up, you go, okay, I really need to pay attention now that this is being told to me. So like the Three of Swords for me is one of those cards where I'm like, oh man, this is telling me I really need to watch my health. Last summer that popped up consistently. I got Three of Swords, and I was like, and for a lot of people, Three of Swords tends to show like love triangles and heartbreak. And for me, it was about health issues, and it turned out that I ended up needing to get an EKG to check on my heart, and I was really shocked by that, because as I went back and looked in my tarot journal, I realized that had been popping up for months in every read, was this sign, hey, you need to pay attention to your health. So those cards can mean different things for different people in different situations, and you'll just have to kind of get to know your cards a little bit better and work with them on a consistent basis, and read for other people. Do it for fun and for learning purposes, reading for other people, because practice is what makes us better at our craft. So yes, I do highly suggest tarot and oracle. Like I said, they're not something that I make be the end all to be all on all of my decision making, but they're a great way to sort of show different path options, different choices, maybe how somebody else is sort of feeling about a situation if you're not able to ask them about it. And I keep a tarot journal. Every time I do a reading for myself, I write down what was the question, what was the spread that I did, and what deck I used, and I write down everything. And the reason I do this is because I can go back and look. Again, over time, you'll see certain patterns of behavior with your deck, and you'll also notice different patterns of maybe where your guides are trying to catch your attention and say, hey, you need to pay attention to this. And knowing that, being able to keep track of that, is a great way to go back and revisit maybe something that you've missed in the past. Tarot journals are super easy to make. You just use a regular notebook if you want and just write things down. There's some really fancy ones out there. You can take a look on the internet. There's Pinterest boards for tarot books and tarot cards and all sorts of things. So the options are limitless, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel free to dive into that rabbit hole and find whatever works best for you. So finding what you're interested in is a key component to figuring out what type of witchcraft suits you and where you feel most at home. And it could be multiple different types of witchcraft. It doesn't have to be just one type. In fact, if you're interested in all sorts of things, look up eclectic witches, which are witches that take from all sorts of different belief systems and they mix them all together to make their own version of what works for them. In fact, a lot of us are that way, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, there's always going to be purists in every group, obviously. There will be people out there that tell you that you have to be born into witchcraft, and don't ever let anybody tell you that your power is less than or worth less than anybody else's simply because of the fact that you weren't born into it. And I know that sounds weird, almost like something out of Harry Potter, but it's true that there are people out there that will say that to you, or that because you're not part of a coven that you're not a true witch, that you have to be inducted into certain types of practice. Now, it is true that there are certain types of practices which are called closed. These are practices that you have to be taught, that you have to be initiated into, but that does not mean that witchcraft as a whole is something that you need to be inducted into or initiated into. You can be practicing witchcraft and not even know that you're practicing witchcraft. Lighting candles in prayer is candle magic. Catholic churches do this all the time, where they have you light a candle to a specific saint. That is literally invoking the spirit of the saint to do your request. It's candle magic. That's where it comes from. It is a pagan practice. It is a witch practice. Herbs used with certain intents, down to simple things such as wishing on a star, can be considered witchcraft. It depends on how much your own personal doctrine says you should or shouldn't do something on whether or not it's witchcraft, but anything like that can be considered witchcraft. As you practice and go deeper into what you study and what you are, working with, you'll find more and more things that speak to you and more things that you feel a connection to. And those are not to be ignored. You might find different symbols, different gods or goddesses, different energies, angelic beings, or even different types of crystals, plants, whatever. Those things that speak to you, that make you find channels to utilize your own personal energetic power, are what will help you in your craft and building your craft to be better for yourself and for the people that you work with. Whatever you're interested in, dive into that. Begin to study, research. And I highly suggest reading on things that even maybe you're not as interested in, because it's important to understand. I'm one to definitely speak about bridging gaps and working in many different milieus and understanding other thought processes, because when we understand other thought processes, it allows us to make valid argumentation for ourselves and in favor of our own personal beliefs, which is why I didn't stop studying Christianity. I didn't stop studying Islam. I didn't stop studying Judaism or Buddhism or any Hinduism. I mean, I've personally dug into every single one of these and more, with the intent of understanding what the belief system is. And the reason I do this is because you're going to have a lot of people that are going to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. You're going to have a lot of people that tell you that what you are doing is evil. Don't be surprised when you have a lot of people coming at you telling you that you're going to hell. It's part of the territory. When you sign up to be a witch, when you find this path and you've realized that this is something that is within you, that speaks to you, that calls to you, that you understand, that suddenly the world makes sense, you're going to have this along with it. Do not stop doing what calls to you simply because other people are uncomfortable with it. But what I do urge is that you research so that you can have those conversations in a polite and meaningful way that allow you to speak your heart and your truth without being offensive, mean, or cruel to other people. This will help so much, because the one common complaint that I have heard over and over and over again is about those who continue to fight people with high emotion and negative intent. When this happens, especially coming from a witch, the last thing that we want is somebody who's telling us that we are doing something wrong to be solidified more in that belief system because we were negative or rude to them. Because sometimes we're the only person that they've ever met that embodies that term witch. Don't we want to be the best version of that possible? Don't we want to be so amazingly wonderful that they look at us as a witch and say, I don't understand why there would be anything negative to say about that person. That's my own personal belief, but again, that's because I work in love and light. So, and there are plenty of witches that don't do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to judge somebody else's practice. But what I am here to say is that by studying other religions and belief systems, you are more prepared and more able in body, mind, and spirit to have those conversations in a meaningful way. That being said, being a witch also does not mean that you have to work with deities. You are not valued more based off of how many deities or which deities you work with or don't work with. That is a personal choice, and any deity that ever approaches you to work with them, in all honesty, you have the right to say no. Plain and simple. You do not have to work with anybody that you do not want to work with. Being a coven is also not a factor. You do not have to be part of a coven in order to be a witch. You don't even have to be part of a group. I personally am solitary, and I like to keep it that way. There are certain mysteries and things that have been provided to me by my guides that I do not want to provide to anybody else, and that's my own personal choice. It's not that I'm hiding that information. It's just simply I feel that this is my own personal power, something that was given to me, and that providing that to somebody else might not be as effective or useful for them. Being a witch is, simply put, having the ability to shift energy. That's it. You have the ability to shift energy, and it's your choice on whether or not you're going to use that energy shift for good, or whether or not you're going to use that energy shift for your own personal or even selfish, ego-driven reasons. Personally, again, because I practice in love and light, I choose to only align myself with other witches that practice the same. I do not like to align myself with witches that are making choices that are driven by ego. And non-ego agendas mean being elevated enough in your own mindset to understand that sometimes things just are the way that they are, and we don't need to go changing it. We don't need a spell for everything. Sometimes life just has to take its course. And sometimes the way that it takes its course isn't for our own personal benefit, and that's okay. So that's a personal choice of mine. That does not mean that everybody has that their own personal choice. And to be honest with everybody that's out there that's new, that's maybe listening to this podcast for the first time, again, being new to the whole witch scenario, if you're trying to align yourself with other witches, be careful about who you align yourself with. Be careful who you talk to and what you say to them about your own personal craft. Don't ever give out personal information about how you do things or why you do things, because that kind of stuff can be used against you. And I don't say that to make you paranoid. I say that to keep you safe, because I've had a lot of negative things happen to me because I thought that I could trust somebody, and I gave them the name of my personal spirit guide, and suddenly I'm having an energetic bleed out because that person has rewired the energies. I mean, again, being a witch is simply the ability to shift energy. That's it. And you don't need any fancy tools or fancy acquaintances or names in high places to be a witch. It comes from within you. It's your own personal power. And that's exactly what Yes Witch is all about, is helping you find your own personal power. So choice is 100% the deciding factor on whether or not you are a witch. That being said, I thank you so much for tuning in to this week's podcast. Next week, we will be discussing the power of the moon. I hope you will join me then. Thank you again so very much. Please do not forget to check out my website, yeswitch.com. That's YES-WITCH.com. Love and light to all of you. Have an amazing week.